and how examples from Black history can still impact and inspire us today. Okay? We can still do remarkable things, and without further ado, Sylvia.
Thank you. First, I want to start by saying thank you to the African Ancestry Network and to Intuit. I think that it is fantastic that they allow us this opportunities like this to be able to honor and celebrate Black History Month. When I knew what I wanted to talk about, I wanted to make sure that I was as educated on the topic as I could possibly be. So I started reading books, and I read for hours and hours. And it's hard when you're reading books about riots and lynchings and the KKK, you're going to get angry. And as I was reading these books and I was getting angry, my husband knew that I would be angry when I read these books. And he knew who I would be angry at. And that made him nervous because, well, every time I opened a book, he'd say, "You know I wasn't there, right?" There reached a time where he thought it was best that he cook his own food. If I poured him something to drink, he didn't let the glass leave his sight. But then it was the night that he saw me pick up this book. He took one look at the title and knew it was about to go down. And he figured he needed to do something real quick to remind me of the love that we shared. And I heard him say, "Alexa, play our wedding song playlist." But we made it through. I still love him. And on the other side, we both emerged with such an appreciation for the hope and the courage of those who came before us. Hope and courage. Those are the two words that come to mind when thinking of those who lived in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma in the early 1900s. But before we get too much further, I want to make sure that everyone here feels like they're in the right place, like they're going to get something from this. So if you could please, I want you to raise your hand and keep your hand up for a moment. Raise your hand if you have ever been treated unfairly. Raise your hand if you have ever faced adversity because of somebody else's ignorance. Raise it higher if it's already up. Raise your hand if you have ever had a dream or a hope, something that you wanted to do, and you were too terrified to take a step to do it. All right, if your hand is up, you're in the right place. Now keep your hands up for just a second. I want to ask everybody, get the burn. I want to ask everybody, look around the room, please. I see hands in the air of every single color. Okay, you can put your hands down now. The reason I wanted to call, Tanner's like, the reason I wanted to call that out was because while this story is told through the eyes of Black people, the lessons that come from it aren't only for Black people. When I was trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about, I thought that it would be hard, but it really wasn't when I thought of a couple of experiences that my children had. This is my son, Jacob. Jacob called me one day. He was working as a salesperson at a car dealership, and he was next up in line to get the next walk-in customer. That next customer happened to be a white woman, and when she walked in, she immediately told management that she refused to work with a Black salesperson. And instead of telling her that they were not going to discriminate against their employees, they accommodated her, and they found her a white salesperson to work with. Now you can imagine how that made my son feel. Then, not that long afterwards, I get a call from my daughter, Jordan. She's a bartender. Jordan called me and told me that her white manager had a meeting with all of the bartenders, of which she was the only Black one, and he told them that after a certain point in the evening, they needed to cut back on the amount of alcohol that they were putting into the drinks of Black and Mexican men because the club was getting to be a little too ghetto. And when my daughter told him that that was racially insensitive, in front of everyone, he told her she was an effing idiot. Now, I can tell by the gasp and the look on your face that you're having a hard time believing what I just told you. Like what I just told you can't possibly be true. But I promise you, I am old enough to have a daughter who tends bar. And my son is 5 years older than her, but we could talk about skincare tips later, people. That's not, stay focused. I need you to stay with me. How does one dare to dream? That is what I shared with my kids. I wanted to uplift their spirits. So I asked them, I told them the stories of Greenwood, and that's what I want to share with you today. So how does one dare to dream when logic tells you that there's absolutely no way? The answer is hope. And O.W. Gurley was filled with it. In 1905, when oil was discovered in Tulsa, Oklahoma, it turned that dusty little town overnight into a thriving community as white people flocked there in search of wealth. Now, at that point in time, Black entrepreneurs were pretty much unheard of, but hope defies logic. Hope defies reason. Hope is what shines a light on the path to your goals that would otherwise be engulfed in darkness. And Mr. Gurley reasoned that if white people could prosper from the oil boom, somehow Black people could too. So in 1906, he and his wife packed up and they moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where he bought 40 acres of land and called it Greenwood. And on those 40 acres, he built a grocery store and a boarding house. In 1907, when Oklahoma became a state, the very first order of business was they passed a law of segregation, making it illegal for Black and white people to live in the same community. So Mr. Gurley only sold plots of his land to other Black people. Greenwood was located on the north side of Tulsa, and it was separated by the Frisco Railroad tracks. And these railroad tracks served as a divider between the north Black populated side of the city and the south white populated side of the city. Now, it was very subtle, but did y'all catch what I did there with the black and the white? Visuals. Mr. Gurley had a hope that Greenwood could turn into something where Black people could prosper. And in the 1900s, that was unheard of. But it happened. It happened as more and more courageous Black people filled with hope for a better life came to Greenwood. And the population grew to about 10,000 people. And that population included doctors and lawyers and dentists. There was a hospital. There were business owners who had a hotel and jewelry stores. And they had everything that you could think of. There was even a skating rink. I didn't know they had skates back then, but there was a skating rink. And then for those who didn't work in Greenwood, they worked in South Tulsa with the white people as maybe maids or gardeners or shoe shiners. But from the lawyer to the gardener, because of segregation, they were all forced to spend their money in Greenwood. And that resulted in the people in Greenwood living very comfortably, and even quite a few of them actually becoming wealthy, Mr. Gurley being one of the first of them. So you see, hate made Greenwood prosper, but it was hope that populated it. Have you ever wanted to do something? You've had this idea, this hope, this urge to do something, but you were too terrified to do it because you were afraid of failure or afraid that somebody would say something negative about it? I know that was me. I have wanted to be a speaker for quite a while, and I always held myself back because I was very nervous. And even today, as I was being introduced and I was standing right there and I could feel the nerves in my stomach, and I looked at the door and I said, "Sister, it ain't too late. You can leave. Nobody will be mad for getting these 30 minutes back. They will see it as a gift." But I stayed. The other hope that I had was I wanted to write a book. But the minute I even thought about writing a book, I thought the negative thoughts came to my mind, and I said, "You don't know the first thing about writing a book. You're not smart enough to write a book. You didn't go to school for this. You write a book, it's going to fail." Now, Intuit always encourages us to bring our whole selves to work. So I'm going to share something with you that is a part of my whole self. And if you get something from it, great. But otherwise, feel free to let it go in one ear and out the other. But what I told myself was that God does not call the equipped. He equips those who answers the call. So I published that book. And within a few months, it sold a few thousand copies. And then a couple of months after that, it was actually got a favorable review in Publishers Weekly. And then after that, it became an Amazon bestseller. And after that, it won its very first award. I took a page out of Mr. Gurley's book. His hope and the courage he had to follow through with it changed the lives of thousands. And we can do that too. We can draw from the power of hope and courage. Studies show that hope leads to better happiness, it leads to us reaching our goals, it even leads to a lower risk of death. Hope is what pushes us to do things when logic tells us that there is no way. It's hope that keeps us asking at every state of the company if we can bring our dog to work. It is hope that keeps us asking at every meeting, will we ever get that 4th of July week off again? And I hope Sasan gets a chance to watch this recording so that next week, when that question pop up on Slido, and we all know it will with about 45 upvotes, Sasan will know that it's not that we can't take no for an answer repeatedly. He'll know it's because we were keeping hope alive. Forgot to advance the slide. That's my book. We're going to go on to the next one. Greenwood had it all. It was a city within a city. Greenwood was like the promised land for Black people. But on the other side of those railroad tracks, there lived hatred, jealousy, and Klansmen who numbered in the thousands. On May 30th, 1921, Black 19-year-old Dick Rowland went into the Drexel building, where he got into an elevator that was operated by white 17-year-old Sarah Page. The elevator jerked and Rowland tripped. No one really knows. He stepped on her foot or pulled her arm, something like that. But whatever it was, it caused Sarah to scream and others to come running to her rescue. Rowland knew that that scream was a death sentence because just a few months earlier in a different part of Oklahoma, in a different town, an African American had been arrested for assaulting a white woman, and a mob came, pulled him out of his jail cell, tied him to a pole, and they killed him. So Rowland did exactly what anybody with a brain would have done. He ran. But he was caught the very next morning on May 31st. He was caught, he was arrested, and he was accused of assault. An accusation that Sarah herself did not support. Sarah did not file charges. She did not say and did not confirm that he attacked her, but it didn't matter because the Tulsa Tribune, the newspaper for South Tulsa, had already hit the streets with its own made-up, inflammatory version of what happened in that elevator. And they even had their headline as a call to action, "Nab Negro for attacking girl in elevator." At 9:15 the next night, on May 31st, the residents of Greenwood had learned that there was a lynching that was going to be planned for Rowland. So about 100 Black men, many of them World War I veterans who armed themselves, went into South Tulsa and they went to the courthouse. Their plan was to offer their assistance to the sheriff to help protect Rowland. And by that time, a white mob had already started to gather, and their number was about 2,000. A struggle ensued between the two groups. A gunshot was fired, and as one survivor put it, that was when all hell broke loose. The Black residents retreated because they were grossly outnumbered, and they retreated back to Greenwood. The officers began to deputize members of the white mob and arm them. And those who didn't get guns from the police, they looted other gun stores in the town and armed themselves. And then the heavily armed white mob went into Tulsa, went into Greenwood. They not only attacked Greenwood on foot and from cars, they attacked from the sky. And this was the very first aerial attack on an American city. Their plane, they had about a dozen planes that flew over the city, raining down bullets and dropping homemade bombs that set buildings, homes, and businesses almost instantly on fire. The mob went into the homes of the residents, and you got to remember, by this time it's well after midnight, so some of them were even asleep. They went into their homes, white women carrying shopping bags, looting whatever they wanted, and whatever they didn't take, they made sure they destroyed it. The mob did not care. They shot men, women, and children. All that mattered was that they had black skin. That made them an open target. By noon, or excuse me, by morning, or actually by dawn, the mob had grown to 15,000 people. And not only did it include men and women, but it included children as young as 10 years old. By 11:30 the next morning, the National Guard had arrived and martial law was declared, but by that time it was too late. The whole 35 blocks that made up Greenwood was destroyed, or it was continuing to burn. The people of Greenwood who were left, well, there were those who obviously died that night, and then there was the injured, and most of them were left homeless. I'm sorry, most of them were left homeless. Best official counts put the number of the dead at 300, but many postulate that that number is a lot higher because there's no way to account for those who were mortally wounded and fled. And plus, witnesses say that they saw white men putting black bodies on trucks and carrying them away. They even saw some bodies being dumped into the Arkansas River. And even as recently as 2021 and also 2022, mass graves are still being uncovered to believe to be the final resting places of many of those who were killed on that night. After the riot ended, well, they say riot is really a massacre. After it ended, to add insult to injury, the National Guard and the police arrested and detained the black men of Greenwood, made them march with their hands up for several blocks and marched them to places that they had turned into facilities and to holding facilities. Now, as you can imagine, not one white person even received as much as a slap on the wrist for their part in what had happened. Now, I'm going to digress for just a second because I want to point something out. So you see the slides that I'm sharing right now. I found lots of them like that had the captions on them. And I've typed on at the top what those captions, what they say, so that you can actually read them. Now, as I was reading this, as I was looking at these pictures, I noticed something. These weren't just pictures. They were postcards. So not only did white Tulsa not suffer any legal ramifications for what they had done, not only did they have no remorse for what they had done, but they used pictures of the atrocities that they committed as postcards to commemorate the event. Do y'all understand why my husband felt the need to hide a couple of nights? I'm just saying. It didn't take long before South Tulsa felt the financial sting of what they had done because they had lost a lot of their cheap labor. So what they did was they had, when they released the African Americans, they made them carry identification cards. And the cards had to be signed by their white employers. And that signified that they were a good Negro. And if they didn't have those cards with them, if they couldn't produce them, they would be arrested. As many people would probably think, they would think Greenwood would turn into a ghost town. And I have a letter here between two friends, and the letter is in Hannibal Johnson's book, Black Wall Street. And it's a letter between Curtis and Oliver. Curtis lived in Detroit, Oliver lived in Greenwood. And Curtis, they were good friends. And Curtis figured that Oliver would most definitely want to get out of Greenwood. So he sent Oliver $40 and told him to get himself a ticket and come to Detroit. And I want to share with you Oliver's reply. True it is, we are facing a terrible situation. It is equally true that they have destroyed our homes, they have wrecked our schools, they have reduced our churches to ashes, and they have murdered our people, Curtis. But they have not touched our spirit. And while I speak only for myself, let it be said that I came here and built my fortune with that spirit. I shall reconstruct it here with that spirit, and I expect to live on and die here with it. Now, I know I said at the beginning that I was talking to everybody, but just for a second, Black people, let me holler at you. I hope that when we look at that letter, we feel a sense of pride because that's what we come from. The hate and the bigotry and the pain that our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents went through, how strong were they to get through that? And that is what courses in our blood. And even though today we still, like with the examples of my children, we still suffer through discrimination and we still get victimized, we cannot let that take away from the obvious truth of the fact that just that we are still here means that we stand as victors. We owe it to the Black and the white people who came before us, who fought for us to have the right to vote, to be able to be educated, to be able to be considered human beings, when at a time they tried to even say that we weren't that. We owe it to them to never give up hope and to never give up courage. And we definitely owe it to our children because we cannot let them see us. We cannot let them see us think of ourselves as victims because that is not what we are. We are strong. And if our children don't see that hope in us, they're going to be lost. We owe that to them. Now, many people would think that that was the end for Greenwood. Oh, and white people, I'm talking to y'all now too. So, many people would think that that was the end of Greenwood, but it wasn't. Those who stayed rebuilt their homes, they rebuilt their churches and their businesses and their livelihood. Now, Greenwood is not considered a Black Wall Street today, not anymore, because as the country integrated, the dollars that were once kept within Greenwood now were able to be spent elsewhere. But that does not mean that Greenwood does not still serve as a very powerful reminder to us of the extraordinary things that even ordinary people can do. I want to extend to everyone listening a challenge. And that challenge is to get a book. There's so much knowledge out there that Black history holds for us. And even though reading that book may make you angry, it may make you sad, dig a little bit beneath that, because what you're going to find are some of the most incredibly moving stories of the power of the human spirit. And it will inspire you, I promise you that. So, allow hope to manifest your miracles, and then let courage allow you to stand in the face of anybody who dares to oppose you. And remember that no matter what color we are, what we do today, someday will be Black history.
That was very awesome. That was moving. Learned a lot from that. So hope and courage. We are not victims, we are victors. So I really love that. I loved the parables, how you applied your life and your children's lives today and things that they have gone through. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
So we do have a couple more minutes for questions. Does anyone have any questions in the room?
Can we find your book on Amazon?
Yes. And real quick, I was telling them today, whenever somebody goes on Amazon and they buy the book and then they leave a review, I will almost instantly get a call from my dad. Baby, did you read the new review? So that's the best part of it.
So you can tell her father when you're writing the review, yes, I know Silvia, I work with her.
Yeah.
Okay? So please do that for her father.
Yes,
Okay?
and the book is called Living a Parable, and yeah, you can find it, and you can find it online, even at Barnes & Noble, so there's a few different places online to get it. Thank you.
All right, Renika?
Yes.
I just want to, during your discovery and researching this, were there any moments where you're like, I didn't know that?
Oh,
I
yeah,
definitely have to share this.
the postcards. I did not know that those were postcards that I was looking at until I went onto like a historical site and I saw the front and the back. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. They used it as souvenirs. It was a white supremacy thing, and they used it as souvenirs. So that was probably one of, and the identification cards, the fact that they had to carry that. And if a white employer just didn't want to sign it, then they better not be caught out without it. So those were the two things that really kind of shocked me. I'm like, oh, wait till they find this out. You know, this I know this gonna get them. So, so yeah, that was.
Were they gonna read along with you as you were reading all those books?
No, you know what would happen is I would do the reading and then I would come in here like, baby, listen to this. And I would read something to him and just like, you know, he just kind of shake his head. So yeah, that's kind of how that went down. Yes.
Along with those two things that you didn't know, I'm embarrassed to say that I learned about this only about 3 or 4 years ago, the entire thing. But the question that I have for you is, today I learned, in addition to the IDs and the postcards, about the airplanes.
Oh, yeah.
Where did those come from?
There was an airfield in Tulsa, and I can't remember the name of it, but that's where the planes came from. So they went all out and they
were
attacked.
So it was like
Yes.
an army or they're
Yes.
private?
What's that?
They were privately owned or a base of?
No, it wasn't a base. I can't even remember the name of the airfield, but yeah, that's where the planes came from. And just for the heck of it, Dick Rowland, he actually did not die. He survived, and he was exonerated because Sarah Page did not press charges. She held, I'm so happy, she held true. She did not give up, and she did not say that he attacked her, and he actually left Tulsa. So,
Wow.
yeah. Why would you stay, right? But so anyway, thank you everybody for showing up. I really appreciate it. And for those of you who are on Zoom, who are still here, thank you for listening. I really appreciate it.
All
So,
right. Thank you.
and I'm
all.
glad I didn't run out the door.
Yes, I do have one question. So you talked a little bit about this, public speaking being one of your fears that you were able to overcome today, right? What's next?
I want to do more. I want to do more public speaking, and it's funny. I've had this vision for a while of, every time I see Sasan or Alex Chris or somebody sitting and talking with somebody, asking them, well, how did you do this? I see myself sitting like, you know what, Sasan, let me tell you about it. Let me tell you, this is how I did this, and this is how, I have that in my head. I want to publicly, I want to motivate people. And the other thing is I'm really big into health and fitness. And I've led a group of about 200 women. They were online, and I led them to kind of become healthier and to change their lifestyles, and that is extremely rewarding. So somewhere between health and fitness and also religion, I want to be able to motivate people with my voice to improve their lives.
Okay, I can definitely see you doing all of that, accomplishing all of your dreams. So once again, thank you all who have joined us virtually, and thank you all who taken the time to come in and join us physically. All right, have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks,
And one more
everybody.
round of applause.